So a few years ago, I was sitting in an audience like this, and I was anticipating with real eagerness the speaker who was about to speak, only he was an hour late. And the room was a little smaller than this, but it was overcrowded. There were about 100 people in a room that the fire marshal probably would have been happy with 50 in. And I was getting poked by my neighbor every time she turned to talk to the person next to her. And then she'd turn and back to me and say, "I'm sorry," because it was a really nice vibe in the audience. Well, finally, an hour later, this funny little man shows up. He's wearing strange clothing to Western eyes, and he walks very slowly to the middle of the stage, and he sits down on the floor. And he says nothing. 1 minute goes by, 2 minutes go by, 3 minutes go by, and this person has said nothing. And then suddenly, he lets out this unearthly laugh. And he says, "I better say something really important because you've been waiting for such a long time." His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, then began to speak. Now, I was amazed by this performance. As somebody who thinks a lot about public speaking, to have a speaker get up and not say anything was astounding to me. And yet, something had happened between him and that audience, between him and me. I thought he was looking only at me. Everybody else in the audience said the same thing. He was looking at me. And I wanted to know, what was that? What did he achieve? How was he so authentic in 3 minutes of silence when the rest of us work so hard to be authentic, and we talk and we move and we carry on? And what was he doing? And it turns out, we've had a lot of great brain research in the last 15 or 20 years. And it turns out that that thing that he did was mostly unconscious. It was silent and it was mostly unconscious. And with that unconscious behavior, he achieved enormous authenticity. And you are in an industry for whom communication is incredibly important. You work with people on the worst days of their lives. And authentic communication is incredibly important. And that's what I want to talk to you today. What is that unconscious process that you can master that will give you that authentic communication with the people you work with your clients, with the world at large? Does that sound like a good program? Yeah? Can we see a vote? Everybody in favor? It's not a democracy, but I just thought I'd ask. Great, thank you. So let's do that. But before I do, I want to start by asking you, what are your biggest, most pressing communication issues? You tell me. I'm going to come to each side of the audience here, and I would like to get just one idea from each section. So we'll start over here on the right wing. What's your biggest communication, most pressing communication challenge? What keeps you up at night?
Communicating a vision and a passion for our organisation to other people in that organisation.
Wait a minute, I can't make that out. I'm going to come down to you.
It's the accent.
So communicating vision?
Yep.
Did you say? And passion?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. We'll talk about that. Great. Let's go over here. How about a centrist?
Communicating credibility to a prospect that I haven't met before.
Okay. How to be credible with a stranger? Great question, and we'll get to that. Excellent. All right. And one more over here from the left wing.
Communicating to people that really aren't that interested in communicating with you for whatever their reason.
Great. Okay. Communicating with people who aren't that interested in hearing what you have to say. All right. Great issues. We'll get to them all. It's a long way back, but then I'm in adrenaline time, so it rushes by. So let's delve into the mysteries of communications. The good news is that the brain research is telling us a lot about how this thing works. The bad news is that most of what we thought we knew, most of that common sense insight into communications is wrong. We all have in our heads something that the researchers fondly call the little director. And this is how we think it works, right? You're thirsty, you're hungry, you want to go watch TV. Your little director gets that thought and says, okay, body, get up there and walk over there and do whatever it is. Drink the water, watch the television, right? Isn't that the way you imagine it works? Roughly speaking, you've got a little guy up here, or a little gal that tells you what to do. So what happens is we get a thought, a conscious thought, and then that leads us to an action, a gesture, a movement, and then speech, okay? What the brain research shows is that it actually works the opposite way from that. We have this thing that's fondly called the lizard brain, or the amygdala, and it gets an emotion, it gets an intent, it feels hunger, it feels danger, and it directs the body to move. Here's the shocking part about that. It's completely unconscious. And then, and only then, you get a conscious thought. And then you might talk about it, say something. So the result is, the way the brain actually works is that our conscious brains spend an enormous amount of time explaining to ourselves, explaining to the little director, why we just did what we did. That's really counterintuitive and strange. That's not the way we like to think of ourselves. We think of ourselves as purposeful people who know what we're doing, right? And have conscious actions and thought and behaviors. But in fact, we have 10 million neurons for every single neuron, unconscious to conscious. So we have 10 million unconscious neurons for every single conscious neuron that we have. We have this great, big, enormous, incredibly efficient unconscious brain, and we have this tiny little conscious brain, which is easily overwhelmed by data, by information, by what comes at it every day. And so what we're going to do today is unpack that unconscious brain and figure out how it makes communications work. Sound good? Every communication is two conversations. There's the conscious one, which is the verbal, the content, what you're saying. And then there's the unconscious one, the nonverbal. And when those two are aligned, you can be an effective communicator. You can even be charismatic. When those two are not aligned, what happens? What happens? Shout it out. Exactly. People don't believe you. But more than that, people believe the nonverbal, unconscious behavior every time. Let me give you a little demonstration which will make it simple and obvious. Supposing I'm the speaker and I am walking up to the podium and I'm moving like this. And I get there and I say, I'm really happy to be here today. Which do you believe? Do you believe the words or what you just saw? What you just saw, right? It's not even a contest. You know that to be true. The words you assume are not true. That's what happens every time. That's why it's so essential for you to be authentic communicators. You've got to get in charge of that unconscious behavior. You've got to understand it and finally master it.